Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Nightwing number 74. So it's been a good long while since I've talked about Nightwing, but I did do a whole little update video on this character back in his Rick Grayson days when all that Talon stuff was largely a speculation. Since then, they very much did have a whole storyline where Grayson very much flirted with becoming a Talon. We have continued that whole ongoing arc with Rick Grayson and his memories now being altered, but we've learned a little bit about the story behind that. And basically, ever since Grayson was shot in that Batman comic by Tom King, back when he was briefly working as Batman, that is, Grayson was, he's been brainwashed by this crystal thing. And eventually, the Joker got a hold of it and has brainwashed Dick Grayson into Dickeyboy, a villainous new henchman for the Clown Prince of Crime. So, once again, we have this insane change for Dick Grayson that really has no business being any good. I'm not even talking about anything actually in this book. Let's take all that aside for a second and just talking about the Rick Grayson stuff, all that Talon business. I feel as though most writers, and just from a general standpoint in fiction, this is a clumsy move or something. I hope I'm making my point clear at this time. Thanks for joining us, Karsten Logan. But what I'm saying is, like, it really kind of comes across as like a little hacky or something. If you tell people just from the outside, it's like, oh, Dick Grayson got shot in the head and his memories are all messed up, so now he's Rick Grayson, a badass who doesn't care about Batman and drives a taxi. And now then he's gonna like follow up on his weird family bloodline with the Court of the Owls, and eventually is going to be brainwashed by the Joker into becoming something called Dickeyboy, a smiling, prancing version of Dick Grayson that works on behalf of the Joker. It just has the best name in the world, like Dickeyboy. I can just imagine the Joker having so much fun with that name. So, if you were to tell anyone about any of this, without them having read any of these books or really knowing much about Dick Grayson beyond his history as Nightwing or Robin, they're going to think this is a farce or ridiculous, dumb, or something. I assume the assumption is going to be that these books are bad and these moves are silly and just an attempt to sell comics. And certainly that's all part of this. And my outside reaction to that is usually along those lines. But when we get down to what's actually happening in this book and what's largely happened in the Nightwing series, as written by Dan Jurgens, he kind of pulls all of this stuff off. That's true of this issue and has been largely true of every Nightwing book that I've read from Jurgens at this point. Karsten asks if I like his new suit. Yeah, I like the outfit. It's an interesting mix of color, feels a little more like a classic take on Nightwing, distinguishes him a little bit from everyone else. I like it more than the Red Hood outfit we get in this issue, let's put it that way. I think on the whole, we have Ryan Benjamin doing the penciling, Richard Friend doing inks, Rain Barreto doing coloring, and World Design doing the lettering. They all do an excellent job at showcasing a very fun story that has a lot of ground to cover in a single book, yet does a good job. And I like this overall design that you were talking about of the new suit. I don't know if Benjamin and Friend were the ones behind that design, but it looks cool either way. And this particular book sets the stage for a new direction of Nightwing's character, actually. I guess that's a little bit of a spoiler, but you had to know that was coming eventually, and the thing very clearly on the cover implies it's sort of dealing with the outset of the Nightwing Joker War issues. But I liked it, and I think it paints a solid path for the future of Nightwing comics, and is on the whole a pretty cool payoff for all of this content that's been set up regarding all of this stuff I've been talking about for Nightwing that's been going back for dozens and dozens of issues at this point, and like at least a couple of years, I think, unless I've got my timelines all mixed up. So it's a cool book, and I definitely recommend it. I will get into it a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of give a more general review of it. And it does a lot about Grayson's character without it getting like schmaltzy. Karsten says, do you think Nightwing should return to his Nightwing costume? I kind of assume that's the direction, but I also figured that this outfit would kind of be an influence for that. But Jurgens has kind of got a lot of ideas potentially on the table for all of this. And I'm very curious about what the future is for this character. That actually isn't really set up here. It really could go in any direction at this point, which is kind of cool. So let's get into what happens in the book a little bit. We open on B, Nightwing's lady friend from Bloodhaven, who really just knows Grayson as Rick. She thinks about how much she hates Gotham City as she finds Dickeyboy stand in with Robin and Red Hood, squaring off, in theory, against a bunch of clown henchmen. But of course, we're dealing with Dickeyboy, not Nightwing, and he attacks both Robin and Red Hood without hesitating against his brothers, basically. It's a fun moment as Joker and Punchline watch from a rooftop. And the look of Grayson with that fixed grin is just great and goes very well with his acrobatics and general fighting style. So this is all happening. It's so fun. Jurgens is on point here, and it's what I like about how he's written this Nightwing stuff. He's not trying to be cool or showing off. He's just having fun with some very wild ideas that are taking Grayson in this really memorable direction. This is after them playing around with Grayson's character quite a bit, and him having abandoned Nightwing's position for a while to become a secret agent for a bit, having already been Batman for a time. They really just went in a wild direction with these storylines, and I'm not that against it. Anyhow, Grayson cartwheels away, and Tim Drake goes to take care of some bomb they've planted. It's, classic Joker stuff. While Red Hood, dead serious, without a trace of irony, pulls out a gun and says, Dickeyboy is mine. And they kind of, like, Tim Drake's like, oh, it's Dick Grayson, he's family, please don't murder him. And Jason Todd, and I feel this is all in line with their characters, it's just like, well, it's up to him. If he steps over line, he'll be more than happy to meet him there. So, we're clearly setting up for, like, I don't know, just anything could go wrong. But also, Grayson is just unhinged at this point and clobbers the crap out of Red Hood. So it really doesn't come to that anyhow. Batgirl swings in, attacking Joker, and then tries to, I guess, reason a bit with Grayson, who's now got a gun and is shooting at Red Hood. I assume he's got Red Hood's gun. Barbara tries to reason with Grayson, but they've already kind of talked about this. But she has that crystal thing that I was talking about that had originally brainwashed Dick Grayson. Joker's meanwhile just delighted as Grayson turns the gun onto Barbara. But B runs up and grabs the crystal and he snatches it from her hands. But that's kind of actually what they wanted. And Joker, the second this happens, just walks away because he knows it's all done here. Because now that Nightwing has possession of it, he starts to get a sense of his memories back. And we get what I was talking about a little earlier about this cool series of images. It's done like a million times in comics at this point, but just kind of flashing through Grayson's memories, new and old. And eventually Barbara is able to pull out, like, be Dick Grayson, and he comes home. Karsten saying, would you like to see this costume in the new Gotham Knights game? Well, I just talked about that flash through, and there's a ton of outfits here I'd like to see. like that classic original one we get a glimpse of. Of course, we want also the black and blue that we've seen in a previous Arkham game. And this one would be a fun addition, but there are plenty of others. I was recently flipping through Arkham City, and that cartoony one from the 90s was also pretty cool to see. It was interesting how they managed to animate that in the more realistic looking world of Arkham. So there's certainly a lot of options. Anyhow, at long last, Grayson is free of that crystal and throws it down to the ground. He asks Rick if he's okay, and he corrects her and says his name is Dick. And Batman swings in, and to be fair, it's not like Batman's just waiting out the danger. As we know from the Batman books, there's a lot going on right now. And Grayson almost greets him as Bruce and corrects himself, telling Batman instantly, in a cool little moment, that Grayson has his memories back. B freaks out at seeing Batman, but everyone's really otherwise happy to see Dick Grayson back, except for B, who kind of just slips away, having realized the man she loves is gone. And that's pretty much that, at least for now. All that, and like I said, this book really kind of brings full circle everything that had been set up since that Batman book where Grayson suffered that gunshot wound. So he's at long last kind of on the other side of recovery. Now, when that happened, I remember on this channel saying I didn't really think much of it because I didn't really think much would be made of it. And I couldn't have been more wrong. To be fair, I largely was looking at that in the context of the Batman series and Tom King's writing. So, having not known that it would have a huge effect in the Nightwing series, and Dan Jurgens would be the one to just sort of throw a million different ideas through the ringer throughout this Nightwing run. So I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong, because that's awesome. What we ended up getting with this clear-cut, wonderful little run of different ideas is not only right up Dan Jurgens' alley, but a huge little bolster of new concepts and characters for Nightwing as a franchise, which I think is really valuable. What it really reminds me of is past work with Jurgens, especially concerning Superman. I'm obviously referring to the Reign of Superman storyline, where Jurgens essentially introduced 4 new characters to the mythology of Superman, but also his more recent Superman works, back when I was fully embodied Superman who had all the memories of the earlier pre-New 52 Earth, was living with a family in, like, at first Smallville and later Metropolis, while they were doing their thing, and it was just an interesting dynamic with, like, Lex Luthor as a good guy and Superman having all these allies he could call upon, but many of which were new people to him. That was the kind of climate that Dan Jurgens created for Nightwing, although with a very different tone and a whole different sense of direction, but one I quite liked. Grayson was saying we'll be doing a read and review of Flash Season 0. I guess that's what you're doing or something, or are you asking if I will? But you should specify that, actually, because if you want to do that, that sounds great, man. But if you want me to do that, you will have to write that down, so let me know. But anyways, yeah, so I think I've said my piece on a lot of that. Oh, you're asking. Okay. Well, sure, I can do that. I don't know anything about it, but I know the Flash show, so any references or whatever I would pick up on, assuming that's what it's in reference to, or maybe it's something from the comics. I will say I kind of stepped away from the Flash books lately because the last creative run really lost me after a while. They had some cool ideas, it just didn't really feel like it paid off. But I think there's a new creative team taking over in the comics, so I might kind of check that out at some point in the future too. And yeah, I gotta say I definitely enjoyed this Nightwing book. I haven't read the last few or whatever, but I've been keeping up and occasionally checking in with the series, and really wasn't disappointed with what I got. I don't know what the future for Nightwing is at this point. It kind of was something that Karsten brought up earlier in chat, and we were talking about a bit. And I mean that just both behind and in front of the pages. On page, it does seem like, well, it's very confirmed that we're going back to Dick Grayson and his history with all these characters, which is nice and refreshing. But I don't mind the journey and us having gone through all of this. It feels like a triumphant moment that Grayson managed to recover from all of this after a long and pretty uphill battle. There's a great moment late into this book I forgot to mention where Batman admits that he has very much been keeping tabs on Grayson this whole time and looking out for the kid. Because of course he would have. Like, that's almost a given, but it's just nice to have that confirmed and that he really was worried about Nightwing while he was going through all of this and really wasn't himself. So it's kind of cool that he's back, and we'll see if he returns to Bloodhaven, if he still wants to be Nightwing. We don't even really know what costume he is. I assume there's solicitations out there, but I haven't really checked it out too much myself. And maybe I should look into that a bit, but I don't know long term. I think for the immediate future, I did check at some point, and Dan Jurgens is staying on the series, I believe, but I don't know if that's going to continue indefinitely or what DC's plans are for this series. I don't think it's ending the way some DC books are over the next couple of months, which means I'm very curious to see where we're going from here. It might make sense for them to want to continue considering we're at 74. It's not too far a step away from issue number 100, which is a pretty cool achievement for a series like Nightwing. So, yeah, we'll have to see about all of that. But for now, I think we'll leave it at that. A very cool moment for Nightwing overall, though, and I'm very happy that this character's kind of back in form, we'll say. Like I said, I enjoyed the journey. It never would have been a good permanent thing for Nightwing, but I think it was well signaled from the beginning that that wasn't going to be the case, and instead this was an exploration. And given how well and long they played it out, I think that was appropriate. If this had continued forever, it would have fallen into the wrong writer's hands eventually, and everything would have fallen apart at some point or another. Doing this little adventure is something comparable in terms of length and scope to Superior Spider-Man, and that feels pretty memorable. That's a cool thing to do for a character like Dick Grayson. And I like the idea of Dan Jurgens continuing with this character for that reason. I think he's a good, positive force for this character, which is interesting. That writer, by the way, Dan Jurgens, I've talked about a little bit here, but he's very unique. He's one of the few holdovers remaining from the 90s that still, in my opinion, puts out reliably good content for either Marvel or DC, in Jurgens' case, DC. But a lot of writers who were big back in those days are dated if they come back to superhero stories in general. I'm not really thinking of specifics, but a lot of them, well, okay, I am thinking of certain writers, but without dropping names. Like, they did a lot of this back in the New 52 with, and okay, I guess I am dropping names, and Ascenti, Rob Liefeld, and a couple of writers like that. The only one that I feel truly and consistently holds up is Jurgens, who keeps adding stuff to new character, or to the, like, whatever character or series he gets attached to, particularly starting around the Rebirth era. First with Superman and now with Nightwing. DC these days, or at least there's a lot of rumors going around, I should say, that starting in 2021, they're going to take a step away from using the best writers out there in the world of comics, and rather starting to focus on lower level talent in terms of, like, the way I interpret that as up and comers, lesser known names that, aren't going to cost as much for one thing, but in my opinion are the perfect people to be writing for a lot of these series. Because you want newer and fresher names in this world. Relying on the big names like Bendis and even Snyder and Tom King has led to stagnation in a lot of these books. So I am looking forward to newer talent kind of coming in and seeing what they can do across the DC line. But if there's one writer I absolutely want to stay on in all of this, aside from maybe Tinian and Tomasi, it's definitely Dan Jurgens, who always is like I said, like, just this consistently positive force right now for Nightwing, but really whatever character he's working for. If he ends up stepping away from Nightwing, I'd love for him to take on another series. And I was saying as of Rebirth era, but even from before then, he did some pretty good work from Firestorm after basically taking over a terrible, terrible New 52 series of Firestorm books and really made something out of it. So the guy has got a good handle on superhero stories, even 30 years after he started writing for Superman, way back in the day. And his writing back then in Superman has really held up too. So I think he has some cool ideas. He's got a lot of imagination for the world of the superhero stuff. And if you want a cool series to pick up, I think Nightwing's a pretty solid choice. Okay. I think that's enough of that. Thanks for joining, everyone. Karsten, I'll make a note to check out Flash Season 0. Thanks for joining us. And for those watching after, we'll see you next time here on Comic Island with an X-Men comic. One that I thought was pretty interesting and has a lot to say of X's Swords.